In mastering the middle game, I was thinking, who masters the middle game? And there's the obvious answer, Karpov. And then I was like, what's Karpov good at? And I was like, gentlemanly club life? No, he doesn't go to Yale like Matt Larson. So the correct answer was the closed Ruy Lopez. Okay, and if you thought you were bored earlier with the lecture, wait till you see this lecture. I'm not a big fan of the closed Ruy. In the National Open about 3 years ago, I decided in the last round, because when you're playing for money in the last round, you should make weird decisions. I was like, I've never had white in a closed Ruy, never. I've had black in a closed Ruy like once every 3 years, every 4 years. So I was like, okay, I'll have white in a closed Ruy if possible. And I played the Ruy Lopez with white. And I was like, oh, cool. And I won in like 40 moves. And my opponent said, wow, you really understood the opening. And I went, what? He actually said that. And I was like, I moved 3, I was done. Okay, so Karpov's pretty good at the Ruy Lopez. And since I'm older than everybody, except for Karpov, I've seen a lot of Karpov's games, so I have some understanding. Now, I didn't do the Berlin, and I didn't do the Open Ruy, or the Marshall, or anything. So it's just closed Ruy. Now, I'm very opinionated, as you know. And let's say you're playing Kasparov, okay? Which I guess you probably should wake up at that point. So you're playing Kasparov, and you're like, what should I do? And you're like, oh, I know, I'll play sharp theoretical line I don't know that he does. And then he plays some novelty, and he checkmates you and takes all your pieces because he calculates and you don't, and he knows the theory and you don't. That seems like a bad idea. So most grandmasters that I know are so stupid. They play just like that. So you see lots of Kasparov games where that's what he does. And then he retired because it was too easy. Okay, and I'm usually not guilty of this. Usually I'm like, okay, this is the guy I'm playing. This is what he's good at. This is what he's bad at. And then I do what he's bad at. You guys luckily make it easy. So the last game that I lost that was rated was to Sam Savian. And the reason I'm saying this is I'm going to lose a lot of games the next couple of weeks. So I haven't lost in 17 months, and I'm going to lose like 3 or 4 games in the next 3 weeks because I'm playing in a norm tournament here where I'm going to play a lot of good players. And when I played Sam Savian, I was black in a very sharp Sicilian. Not a good idea. And I've done that before. I was black against Lev Milman at a sharp Sicilian and also lost all my pieces. And I remember telling this story earlier today in this restaurant to Matthew Larson, and Matt said, who's Lev Milman? So shows you what I know. So of course you at home don't know who Lev Milman is, because what do you know? But he was a good player. He was IM, GM, depending on who you ask, 2,500 FIDE, and doesn't really play much anymore. Okay, so speaking of the Chicago Open, which I wasn't speaking of, Matthew Larson got his first IM norm. With 2 rounds to go. And of course, that means he won no money. He did half a point more for 1,000, but didn't get it. And if he had won round 8, he would have got a Grandmaster norm with a round to go. But he lost round 8, drew round 9, and okay, got a norm, which is pretty good. And he was querying me, am I the only person born in St. Louis, living in St. Louis, who's ever got an IM norm? And I was like, I think so. Yeah, we don't have a lot of IM born and bred. Yeah, anybody disagree? You guys aren't from here anyway, so you don't know. Okay, so John, were you born here? No. Yeah, I didn't think so. You're our only hope. Okay, you were? Yeah, but yeah. So, okay, but I know Claudia was.
I was not here.
What's that? You were born here in St. Louis? Yeah, and then you woke up and apologized. Okay, now the reason I'm mentioning the Chicago Open is one of our own, Talia Cervantes. Is that her last name? What's her last name? Okay, yeah. She scored reasonably well. Not great, reasonably well, 7 out of 7. Now, for those of you who just walked in, they're like, no, don't call on me. What percentage is that? 7 out of 7. Yeah, and she won, drum roll. I never get a good drum roll here. How about you at home? Yeah, that's good. $5 grand. Okay, but she's from Cuba, and then taxes, so I think like she lost money. All right. So yeah, some of the locals that come here to the club all the time, they're killing it. And Talia's going to be playing in the chess.com nonsense tournament they're having next week. That's the official name, right? Yeah, I think the nonsense tournament. All right, so every game starts the same way the first 9 moves. So the 9 moves are the Ruy Lopez, which in Europe is called the Spanish opening, and in probably every other country. Hey, what do they call it in South America? Spanish? The Ruy Lopez? Man, this is America's sitting together. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we got the closed Ruy. Every closed Ruy ever starts like this. Now earlier I was complaining that when people play Kasparov, when he was good, and they would go into these long, sharp, complicated lines, and then he would crush them, and then I was making fun of them for playing in such a style. And what I wanted to advocate, because this is a Ruy Lopez Karpov lecture, is you should play like Kramnik did. Kramnik actually had the correct strategy: trade all the pieces and make the game very boring, and play something that wasn't very theoretical. Now, saying that Berlin isn't theoretical now doesn't make a lot of sense, but it did 20 years ago when it wasn't very theoretical. Okay? So now everybody plays the Berlin basically because of that match. Now, what point am I making? I don't know. No, I do know. The point I'm making is Karpov was very good at being slightly better Caruana style, right, John? And then slowly but surely winning the game in a million moves. Now, of course, I don't want to lecture more than 10 or 15 minutes, right? You agree. You don't want to hear me for 10. Yeah. And so if I look at some of Karpov's games, they're 90 moves, and move 80 is still the middle game. And I'm like, he's still maneuvering, and his opponent fell asleep, and he turned the clock. Okay. And people here are like, what's this? That's the old clocks, the analog. Okay. Anyway, so I found some games that he won in 20, 30, 40 moves over his career in this position. And my point, the whole point was, if you're playing Karpov, you shouldn't be black in a closed Ruy Lopez. That's not a good idea. That's the thing he's the best at. Okay, and it's just well known. All right, now this is Spassky, who's also quite good. And this was in the 70s when Spassky was quite good. And he played the Breyer or Breyer, depends what kind of ice cream you like. All right, so Karpov facing the Breyer ice cream variation, knight b8. Now this is a very good variation if you're going to lose the game quickly. Why? Because you're setting your pieces back up. So you got knight b8, you're all set. Okay, just a few more pieces and you set up. Okay, and the point of knight b8 is obvious. Black's going to put the knight on d7, the bishop on b7, and the bishop's not blocked anymore. And sometimes when white plays d5, we play c6 attacking the pawn, and sometimes the knight goes to c5 and attacks the bishop. So that's the whole point of the variation. Spassky was playing this since before Breyer was born. Should be called the Spassky variation, which is funny because I think Breyer died before Spassky was born. That doesn't even make any sense. All right, so now usually we play d4. And players today like Gadakomsky will play the Breyer still. If I remember correctly, and I don't, there was the game from the US Championship, Wesley So versus Gadakomsky. And I assume Wesley played d4, but what do I know?
Like my last episode,
yeah, okay. So Karpov played d3 because that's more boring. Okay, so you got to play as boring as possible. Okay, so nobody does anything, and we're going to master the middle game. What Karpov likes to do is not give you any counterplay, and eventually he gets play, but not too much. Don't want to have too much of an advantage, because Caruana wouldn't like that. Okay, and when we play knight d2, what's the idea? What's the landing square for our knight? Knight f1 is not, that's the next square. Then what? G3 or E3, usually then f5 and then mate. Rawr. Okay, so the problem is Karpov's not thinking about his plan all the time. He's thinking about what Black's plan is, and then his opponents don't have any plans because he stops all of them. All right, so knight f1, knight c5. Should we let Black take this bishop? No. Bishops are good. When your rating goes up, you'll like bishops more. So maybe one or two of you like bishops. The other, like Claudia likes bishops, and that's about it. Okay, the rest of you like, what about knights? I play a lot of Bughouse. Okay, so rook e8, because you should always play bishop f8. Yeah, Spassky knew that. Okay, now that knight's too active. It's too good. Okay, so just like Caruana, say b3 again. I dare you, double dare you. Say b3 again. Okay, b4. There we go. Okay, and the knight goes back. And then they agreed to a draw because white played b2 and then knight c5 and repetition. No. Okay, and now he played d4. Ha-ha, when he least expects it. Okay, so now when you see these three pieces in the Ruy Lopez, and you see those a lot, then this pawn's hanging a lot of the time, because there's a lot of guys that are going to be on that pawn. But you notice, before he played d4, Karpov played knight g3. So if he was like, I'll play d4, and then I'll do this at some point, maybe when the knight gets to f1, you'll lose your e4 pawn. But now you won't, because e4 is defended. Okay, now Spassky's not going back to c5, because there's two pawns that can take it. So even if he misses one of them, he's okay. All right, h6, put it in h. Now, what's the most boring move ever? It's the move I forbid most of my students to play. Luckily, Karpov's not my student. Bishop d2, yeah. As boring as possible. Yeah, you got to play boring. Okay, now the bishop on d2 defends these pawns, which may be attacked after some trades, and we let our rook get out, because our bishop on c1 was blocking our rook. And Spassky played knight b6, because he can make knight maneuvers also. Knight goes to c4. And when you see pawns on these color complex, the dark squares, you try to put pieces on the white squares. Okay, now remember, Karpov rule is you never move a piece more than one square, because the opponent might get scared. So bishop to d3. All right, there we go. Okay, so the bishop on f8 wants to be fianchettoed, so g6. Queen c2, that's one square, that's enough. Knight fd7, and now he broke his rule with rook a d1. A lot of times in the Ruy Lopez, we play a4 and we do stuff, and you'll see that in future games. But with the knight on b6, that's hard to do. Okay, but rooks are good in the center. So I like the way all of Karpov's pieces are next to each other, the ones that are the same. That way he could really recognize them. Okay, bishop g7, and now the game's not boring enough, so Karpov made it more boring. He took on e5. He wants to open up the d file. And if Spassky takes with a piece, do some more trading, or he'll have d4 for his knight. Well, me, I would probably take with a knight. But okay, he played pawn takes. Okay, now, when I do game analysis for the Sinkfield Cup and US Championship and US Junior, I have a very important rule of thumb, which seems to be correct most of the time. When they start playing crazy in the opening, the game is a boring draw later. And when they start playing boring like this, then it gets all exciting. Okay? They can't just play one way the whole game. So this is a really boring game. Nothing's happening, and white's a tiny bit better because, I don't know, this rook's not very good, and this rook's opposite your queen. Now this bishop's sort of blocked. I don't know why this knight is here. It can't really move anywhere. So, okay, so now Karpov decides it's time to strike. There's no more boring moves. And he plays c4, which is explosive, right? Okay. And well, if white plays c5, then it actually is explosive. So, okay, we have to take that. And now Karpov gives away the two bishops because he weakens his opponent's pawn structure. Karpov likes when you have permanent weaknesses. You have two isolated pawns. Karpov has no isolated pawns. Now, if I was playing a blitz game or a slow game, I would play knight takes c4. And in fact, I don't even understand why he didn't do that, because that bishop's really good. Even if it's a good trade for white, I still do it because the bishop's too good. So I would take on c4 all day. I don't care if it hangs my queen. Okay, I'm adamant. Okay, so queen e7 to me is crazy. So I guess that's why he lost in 10 more moves. So queen e7, Karpov saves his bishop. Bishop on b3. So I really don't like queen e7. I'm going to call it the losing move, even if it's like best. Well, you can use your computer at home. Okay. And the reason he played queen e7 is he has to get rid of his isolated pawns. If he doesn't and trades on c4, white's going to take, white will play bishop e3, you'll never play c5, and your pawn will be on c7 weak the whole game on an open file. And you're not going to play c6 blocking your bishop because that's too many arrows. So you're not allowed to. Yeah. These guys were good. It was the early 70s, but they knew that computers would come and have arrows everywhere. So. Okay, so queen e7 and c5. Now earlier in the lecture, I was like, when the rook's on a1, we play a4 and open up the file. Well, here, Spassky wants to either take this or play c4, attacking the bishop. So Karpov plays a4, and he says, well, if you play c4, I'm going to retreat. And if you don't play c4, I'm going to go here. and the black knight has a lot of nice squares, right? No. No, the knight's terrible. Okay, so Spassky played c4, and then he played bishop c6, and bishop a4. Ha-ha, Spassky's sneaky. Okay, unfortunately, he might win some material, but he's losing the, he's losing everything. So in this idea, we're skewering, our knight has a safe square. Unfortunately, this is hanging in weak, and this is hanging in weak, and the other black pieces are very passive. And I have two rules for my opponents. For my students. They seem like my opponents. One is you're not allowed to sacrifice, and the second is the funniest answer is obviously always sacrifice. Yeah, that's the funniest answer. But the correct answer is sacrificing the exchange is not sacrificing, okay? Because when you lose the exchange, you lose a rook for a minor piece. And a rook and a minor piece are each one piece. So you're not sacrificing anything. If you give a knight away, then you don't have your knight. What are you going to do? Like go into a chess club and find a knight? Well, maybe. Okay, so queen c1. He's like, you can have my rook. I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this. Okay. Now the rook's not running away, so he moved his knight away. Yum, yum, yum. Took the rook. Now the rook is running away. So, okay. Take it. And now white has a pawn for the exchange. Black's lost a kingside pawn, and black's c pawn is going to be lost, and black's pieces are all terrible. So in the opening and middle game, I would say usually a minor piece is better than a rook, a little bit, especially the first 10 moves when the rooks are in the corner not moving. At the end of the game, when the guy has a rook on the 7th and your knight can't move, then the rook is better. So, well, remember when black played h6? Now white's going to play knight g5, and white's going to play bishop c4, and black's going to be really unhappy. So in this middle game, black's minor pieces are much worse than white's. And even though black has an extra rook, as Dominique Myers would say, my good friend, when I asked him, why did you lose that rook? He said, I have another one. So, okay, so white lost a rook, but he has another one. And I'm not a big fan of these rooks. Okay, the game ended very quickly. Put it on training so you guys at home can't see. Okay, knight d6, defending the c pawn. Oh no, he defended it. And also the knight on c8 was terrible. I can move my rook. Bishop g7. This is a good question for the class. What did black do? I thought it was good. How about you at home? No, you don't know either? You get back there. Don't leave. Darian. Yeah. I thought the class would get that, but they're slow on the uptake. Okay, queen g5. Queen g5 is a funny move because usually you don't think of trading pieces when you're down material, but this rook is attacking a lot of knights. So if you trade queens, you're not going to do well with your knights. For example, takes, and you can't even defend your knight with rook e6. There's a knight here. So now there's a lot of knights hanging. Yeah, that's not good. Okay, so Spassky broke my rule. That's when you know the game is going to end soon. F6. Although, let's play another move and show great tactics to the class. Queen e6. Yeah, rook takes d6, and knight f5 check is good for white. Okay, so f6, sort of forced. Queen g4. Now, once again, we're threatening rook takes knight and knight f5 check. So that's not good. Anyway, I want to point out this rook's doing a good job over here defending this pawn. So white's not going to win that pawn if you were worried. Some of you were like, what if he loses the a pawn and white has 2 passed pawns? No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, so this is the best rook I've ever seen. These knights are pretty good, right? And this queen is all over him. And if the knight moves away from d6, bishop's a monster. And black is like, no, leave me alone. Okay. King h7, which stops my threat. Darn. I wanted to play rook takes and knight f5. Okay. And knight h4. And now a shocking development happened. He resigned, yeah. And I was like, resign? And I was like, well, okay, wait, no. And I only found one move that I would actually make. I was like, nah, I can't go there, can't do that, can't do that. Then I found a move that I thought was like sort of okay. Anyone? What does black do about all this G6 stuff? Yeah. That's what white does. Yeah, that's what white wants to do, but it's black's turn. How does black stop that? Yeah, well, he stopped it better than you guys. He resigned. Yeah. I thought rook G8 and knight F8 is also possible. Yeah. So after either knight F8 or rook G8, you can play knight takes G6, which surprised me, but it probably shouldn't have. So for example, let's play here, I don't know. Okay, so knight G6, that's annoying. Now what? We take it, yeah? Okay, and then check. And then you go here, I assume. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't do that.
What's that?
You could work with the knight.
The knight would take it, that's why I took it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see? You forgot it was there. And then I was like, wow, this is really good for white. Because that move's going to happen next move. And then I was like, no, I'm not taking black here. It's funny, because if the king retreats, my bishop's going to be good all of a sudden. Yeah. So it was funny, in this position where he resigned, also this was the same, rook G8 was the same. Rook G8 was also this. I was like, wow. Yeah. And then after rook takes, what was the winning move? It was like queen here, and you sack everything. Wait, after rook G8 it wasn't knight G6, but I thought it was. Confused. How was I supposed to win? Actually, yeah, that is annoying. Bishop takes c4. Because you can't take my bishop because this is good for white. And then your rook's attacked. Yeah. And now if you play rook g7, you might get checkmated. You probably play knight f5 here. Yeah. This is a funny variation, unless you have black. Then it's slightly less funny. Yeah. But you guys were still worried about that, and I told you not to be. I told you. I told you it's okay. So there was a really good example of using all of your pieces to attack and just getting a big positional advantage and sacrificing the exchange. So after knight h4, I wasn't convinced. So I turned the engine on. Then I was convinced. The engine says 6.5 for white. And I was like, wow, the engine really likes white. And it defends great for black. And I was like, all right, I give up. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, see, Karpov used to be good. And, you know, things happened. OK. So that was one of my favorite Karpov victories. This is a famous victory, too, because they played the opening, and then his opponent resigned. So the middle game lasted like one move. Now, Lulu today asked me, what is the middle game? And I was like, I don't know. She's like, when does it start? I was like, is it move 10? And I was like, I don't know. I kept saying I don't know until she stopped. So, well, sometimes the middle game is move 25, and sometimes it's move 7. Okay. I'm not sure the middle game starts. Does the middle game start there? All right. So somehow these moves were played, because they're played in every game we're looking at today. Okay, and then black resigned. Man, Karpov's good at this opening. No. Okay, so knight b8 was the last game, and he played knight a5, which I've played, and not with good results. Okay, and now, do we let him take? No. No, you never do. Okay, and the point of knight a5, when the knight goes to b8, we play knight b7, bishop here. When the knight goes to a5, we can play c5, which is somewhat illegal in this position. And then your knight can go back to c6 later if you feel like it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And black has sort of a bind on the center, which was why he lasted 10 more moves. Okay, d4. And now black can play more than one move. Some people take on d4 now. Some people play bishop to b7. Some play bishop to d7. Queen c7. And I've had black in this position, but I forgot what happened. And when I say I forgot what happened, I remember what happened. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, knight b d2, the usual Karpov, you know, kind of stuff. Good idea for his opponent to do this against him. Bishop d7, knight f1, rook e8, d5. Now, in the last lecture with Jonathan Schranz, the center was closed, and white started attacking on the king's side, and white made it black. And then the audience was like, why didn't white open the center and lose? Okay, so when the center's closed and nobody can do anything, then you can mate your opponent. When you try to mate your opponent and the center's open, then things happen in the center, and you turn your head, you hurt your neck, there's no insurance nowadays, and you lose. Yeah. Okay, this is in 75, they knew about all that. Okay, so d5 closes the center, knight c6 isn't going to happen. And black was really ready to take on d4. In fact, when I'm black in these positions 20 years ago, I would take on d4, and then I control the c file before my opponent wrestles it from me. But I have it for a little while. And then your knight can go back, and your knight can go to b4 sometimes because the pawn took. Now black can't do any of that. Now black has to outplay Karpov strategically. Okay, so knight b7, that's a good square for the knight. Where's the knight going? Somebody tell me what black's next two moves are. C4, explosive, and knight c5. Okay, then the knight's okay. Knight h2. Okay, so white's going to get all his knights over here, and he's going to get his queen over here, his bishop over here, his rook over here, and with all those red arrows, black resigns. Yeah, nobody's, you get a worse sense of humor. Okay, g6, boo. What rule does that break? Normally, the answer would be don't play g6. Those are my kind of rules. But that's not the rule. I have no such rule. Anyone? It's not even my rule. I'm not even stealing it. It's just a normal rule. Nothing? There are like 20 of you in here? Come on. Somebody knows something. Jonathan Strauss, what's the rule?
Don't open both doors for the bishop.
Yeah, there are two doors in here. Yeah, don't move pawns in front of your king. So don't do that. Now, if his bishop was on g7 already, I'd give him a pass. Okay, but I can't do it now because the bishop's on e7. When my students make these moves, where they want to fianchetto their bishop, they have to fianchetto their bishop. So since the bishop's not here, you're not allowed to do that. You just weaken all the doors. Okay. All right. I thought Jim Morrison died in 71. You check on that, would you? Okay, so we're going to open the door to the black king, and we're going to break on through to the other side. All right, like two of you got that. Okay, so knight g3, what a shocking move. The game's going to end soon, so don't blink. Okay, c4. Why play g6 then c4? Why play g6 before knight g? Okay, never mind. Okay, f4. Rawr. That'll teach him to play g6. Bishop was on g7. I wouldn't really mind f4, but on e7, I don't like f4. Takes, never trade. Bishop takes. And now, again, I don't know about these pieces. I know about this piece, this one. Yeah, I know about breaking through. And also with the bishop on e7, and usually when you play g6, you've already played bishop f8, as in our previous game. Then white's going to play e5. That's annoying. No, stop. Okay, bishop f8, finally. Bishop g5, Well, the knight has a lot of good retreat squares. Okay, now usually when people hang all their pieces, I'm not talking about all of you, you put a piece out, your opponent attacks it, and there's nowhere to go. And you're like, oh yeah. Usually when the knight's on f6, you got like a pawn on g7, and a bishop on e7, and a queen on d8, and the knight on b7 is on d7. And then you're like, yeah, so? Now, the knight's defended by nothing, and it's on an open f file. And probably he didn't see bishop g5, because white just played bishop f4, and he was like, no, my queen. Then he's like, yeah, you can have your queen. Karpov doesn't want a queen, he wants a knight. He doesn't want it to be too easy. Okay, so where's that knight going? Can I attack it with like queen f3 and rook f1? Man, the truth hurts. Okay, bishop back to e7, and then bishop f4, and they agreed to a draw. No. Queen d2, because the bishop wasn't defended, so there was discovered attack. Bishop c8.
Setting up the next game.
There you go. There's somebody who comes to my lectures. Okay, so the bishop's well defended. The knight can now go to d7, finally has a retreat square. Rook f1. Knight d7. See, that's mastering the middle game. There you go. You play bishop f8, then back to e7, then you play bishop d7 back to c8. Then you play knight a5 back to b7, and you never move this rook. This guy's like a world-class player too. Like that wasn't a joke. The only thing I said that wasn't a joke this lecture. Black's a good player, but Karpov was good. Knight g4. Now, if you were better at chess, for example, Caruana, who was just lectured on, you would really like White's position. Like you really like it now, but if you were Caruana, you'd really like White's position. He's never had a position this good ever in his whole life. Yeah. And Black did what any good grandmaster would do. He resigned here. Yeah, because what's going on over here? What's happening? How did that happen? No. Yeah. Now, what did Black do wrong? Probably g6 was wrong. Probably knight b7 was wrong. They're like a little wrong. But the main thing he did wrong is Karpov at near his peak were his favorite opening, and then he like plays it badly, like Black does, and then it's just all over. That's mastering the middle game, open file to the king, all pieces cooperating in the attack, and Black's piece is ridiculous. And Karpov actually played the Ruy Lopez of Black a lot, although most of those games were draws. Okay, so with Black, he could barely draw playing perfect. So that's why nowadays, we don't see a lot of Black in these kind of Ruy Lopez's. Because Fischer was crushing people, Karpov was crushing people, and you see like Wesley So versus Kamsky, and that's not making you want to play it either. So you're just like, well, why am I playing the Croz Ruy when I can play the Berlin and be equal or better? Yeah. Okay, and we'll do one last game because Ben Simon's insistent. He's like, I didn't do nothing. Beliavsky, I have a funny story. Don't edit this out. Although you might. If it was like Mullering, you'd edit it out. Okay, Beliavsky came to the front desk of the chess club because he was working with, do you guys know anything? He was coaching one of the players in the Sinkfield Cup. No? MVL, 2 years ago. And they're like, can we help you? This is a membership club, get out of here. Like, who are you? Yeah, all right. Well, the front desk isn't a Beliavsky is, especially now, because when he was famous, it was before they were all born. And it really was before they were all born. Okay, so Beliavsky used to be good, even though you haven't heard of him. He was a candidate for the World Championship. And in the candidates matches where he was doing well, he lost to? Close. The other one. Kasparov. Yeah, Kasparov. Yeah, Kasparov. Yeah. Beliavsky was pretty good. Beliavsky played the greatest move ever against me to make me resign. That was a really great move he played. He was winning anyway, but he really hammered me with the last move. Okay, so somehow they got to this position, because that's our starting position, and which we call in Russian, Tabia. There you go. Okay, and Beliavsky always plays the Breyer. Now, there's a grandmaster you've never heard of, Tony Miles, and we almost looked at his game. Okay, and Tony Miles, I used to hang out with him occasionally when I lived in Europe, and he told me some funny stories, and I can't tell you any of them except this one. Man, because I would go to jail. Okay. Anyway, he told me, and he can't get in trouble anymore for obvious reasons. Okay. And he told me he was playing Beliavsky. So he went to his internet computer, whatever they do, and he was like, Beliavsky, he plays the Breyer Ruy Lopez. And he was like, he has 0 out of his life. And he was like, ooh. Okay, and he actually said 0. He says he told me he never drew a game that he saw. Couldn't find a game he drew. And he's like, well, I don't play e4, but I'm playing e4 now. And Miles played e4. And it was a Breyer Ruy Lopez. So if I was playing a guy who doesn't play e4 and they play e4, I'd be like, why? But again, la 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 la. And he said Beliavsky's queen got to h8 and was trapped and couldn't move. And he said, I just crushed Beliavsky. He's like, it was great. So that's how Miles prepared for his opponents. Okay, but Beliavsky got the last laugh. Haha. Anybody? No? Yeah, he's alive. So. Okay, so d4, this looks familiar, except Karpov played d3 last time. All right, so they're playing the main line, putting everybody to sleep. And this was in 1992, sort of the end of when Karpov was crushing everybody. Although 94 was his peak rating. So, okay, what do you know? Bishop f8. And I think this is actually a lot of games now, yeah? They're still playing a4, bishop d3.
This is like Karyak and Carlson.
Yeah, this is like a lot of games, yeah. Since this was played in 1992, they're quoting games from the 70s and 80s, but they're still playing this way. So the pawn's attacked. Okay, c6. Yeah. This is every game ever played ever by everybody. Now they're quoting all these games in the notes. Spassky's black in all of them, even the ones he's not. Okay, bishop g7. Now, I'm not saying that Beliavsky's a great attacking player, which he is, and he's really good at sharp positions, which he is, but why is he playing boring, slightly worse against Karpov? Terrible. So Beliavsky actually is good at complicated tactical, that's what he should be doing. He shouldn't be slightly worse and trying to defend and draw. Terrible. Okay, so they're quoting a game from a million years ago where queen b6 was played, and Beliavsky played knight h5. And you're always told by your teacher, shows you what kind of teacher you have, don't put your pieces on the side, rawr. But the reason to put the piece on the side is then it can go in the center. If it's in the center, it can't go there, it's already there. So you gotta go away from the center, then go towards the center, confusing your opponent. So of course, when you see pawn structures, you try to find squares your pieces can go to where they can't be captured. Okay, here your piece is captured, here, right? You go here, I'm gonna capture you, yeah? Okay, but what about there? Oh, knight f4. Ah. Okay, so knight h5 to f4, very common. Another reason to play it is you open up your bishop, which is blocked by your knight, and now it's not. Man, Beliavsky is good. By this time in the game, Unzicker was like, can I resign now? And this is just like normal position. So. Okay, always play. Bishop f1, good. Now knight f4 isn't so annoying because it's not attacking the bishop, then we could just kick it out. So knight f4, like, I don't care. Play knight f4, I dare you. I double dare you. Okay, queen b6, b4, and both players fell asleep. Karpov won on time. No. Knight f4, and Karpov did it again. Wait, he won last time. That's why he did it again. He took on e5. He always does that before his opponents can take and like open up the e-file for their rook. Okay, now in the previous game, which we saw, d takes e5, c4, and then white won in like 25 moves. Okay, so Beliavsky's like, no, I want active pieces. Knight takes e5. Yay, look at all my active pieces. The problem with taking with a pawn is you block all of your pieces. Your knight on d7, your bishop on g7, your rook on e8. So he's like, I'm taking with the knight. In the 2 games ago, when he took with the pawn, I would have taken with the knight. I don't like when my pieces are inactive. Okay, but Karpov's like, no, you're taking with the pawn. Okay. And now, yeah, taking with the bishop or the rook looks risky because I can do this. And then like slap you and stuff. Yeah. I guess with my pawns and attack your pieces. My knight can attack on f3. Your d6 pawn is weak forever on open file. So this actually makes some sense to me. Okay, and then c4. Rawr. Okay, again, in all these positions, when white's playing c5 or winning a pawn, he's doing well. And in queen's gambit positions, even though I'm comparing 2 different openings, which I like to do, we see this bishop being terrible all the time. Okay, and if you gave a lecture, I don't know when it was. Oh yeah, it was an hour ago. You gave a lecture, and then Darian's like, e6, rawr, why is that bishop on d7 so terrible? Okay, that's a problem mainly in queen pawn openings, but it happens here too. The bishop on b7, not the most active. And in fact, John was giving some crazy variation where the bishop did that and got to d5. That's pretty cool. Okay, you could draw some kind of parallelogram. All right, so c4, and now if you go crazy and you take on c4, letting the knight attack your queen, then you grab a free pawn. As we discussed in previous positions, when your pieces get attacked and they can't retreat, that's not good. And so your queen isn't so good. Because, well, maybe get off the board. And then if you have a lot of extra queens like we have here, my comer gets really confused. So, man, it was awesome. I was playing a blitz game yesterday, I think, or maybe I was dreaming. Anyway, and then I asked my opponent how many pawns I was ahead or behind, and they were looking and then started crying. And then it was like I had 7 pawns and they had, okay. And then my comer's like, off the board, there's 1 pawn, so that was easy. Yeah, that's how my comer counts. So if you're playing my comer, put a lot of pieces near the board. Then I'll be like, no, don't do that. Yeah. Okay, so you can't lose your queen because that's terrible. All right, so the best move is to take advantage of the opponent's previous move. In this position, knight d4 is illegal for 2 reasons. The first reason you understand. Second reason is I can take it, so it should be illegal. Okay? After c4, now knight d4 is a good move. So when your opponent plays c4 and their pawn was on c3, you should play knight d4, whether it's legal or it's a bug house game, put it on d4. So the computer or the commentator is suggesting knight e6 to d4, which I agree with. Okay, but he played rook a d8 because maybe he wants to give up the a file later. So you gotta try to do it now. Okay, takes, rook a5, rawr. And now this pawn is attacked a few times, mainly by the piece you forgot about, which was, what's that? Yeah, the high-rated player knows, the bishop on f1. Yeah. So that pawn's attacked a lot, and when you take on c4, which you still shouldn't do, I'm still playing knight c4. And now queen b4 doesn't lose the queen, but it should, because I play rook b1, and then you got this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and yeah. And it's the worst. Yeah. And it's just terrible. Okay, but this is a good piece. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so he played, what did he play? He resigned? No, he played my favorite move, bishop f8. Yes. And now, this will confuse most of you. The bishop is attacking the b4 pawn, right? That didn't confuse you. So he defended it. Yes. No, he defended it. c5 doesn't defend it. Yeah. c5 gives white a space advantage, but now you don't win the pawn on b5. So yeah, Karpov's like, I want to win the pawn on b5. So, okay. Also, c5 moves a pawn, breaking my rule. Never move pawns. So bishop c3. Okay, yeah, that's one of my rules. Okay, now he played knight e6, 2 moves too late. And now black wants to play knight d4, as I discussed earlier with the class. So he played knight to f3. And then that's what happened. Okay, takes. And now he plays c5, and this is a good bishop. So earlier, black had a very good piece on f4, but now black doesn't have a good piece. That's mainly how Karpov played the middle game, was his pieces were good and yours aren't. And the problem now with winning this pawn for free is that, well, this is attacked, but then you open up this bishop. So c5 actually kills both bishops. Both bishops are bad. Rook a7, queen a2, defending the rook, and f7 is always being attacked. Okay, and then e5, and I'm going to cheat some more. Yeah. And then I'll do a Nigel short, and I'll take your bid. Okay, that went a little crazy there. All right, now it's time for counterplay, d3. Karpov loves when you have counterplay. He just calculates 30 moves ahead, lets you queen, and then mates you. No, he doesn't do any of that. So after d3, Karpov's like, that pawn's in my territory, I'll take that pawn. So he plays rook a3. Karpov's very good at retreating. A lot of his retreats, unseen by his opponents, repositioning his pieces to better squares, and that pawn's a goner. But we do have this nice bishop. The class is like, that bishop's not nice. But they're not saying anything because they don't want to, what if it is nice and they're wrong? No, it's not nice, I'm kidding. Okay, rook there, d2, yum. Rook d4, e5, uh-oh. So since the bishop isn't doing anything, we're going to play e6. If the bishop goes to c8, setting up for the next game, then our rook can infiltrate. Although I would not allow e6. I would hold his hands down. I'm not letting him play e6. I've seen what happens when people play e6. I resign. Okay, so they give some moves that stop e6 and say white's winning. For example, this is a funny variation. Takes. Ooh, knight fork. Dang. Hate when that happens. Okay, so he played rook takes b4 because the rook is well placed on b4. And then e6. You can't I play e6. Then he might take on f7. Okay, takes, rook takes. What's funny is this rook that went over here to annoy you is now going to go over here and annoy you. Right? Rooks go sideways. So the white rook on a3 is either going to go to a7 and win, or e3, f3, g3 and win. The king has no defense. This bishop is terrible. All white's pieces are great. Here comes the John Schranz knight, knight e4, and you were always playing f5 with black and stopping that, remember? Yeah. Now you can't play f5. So, I mean, in Blockhouse. Okay, so king h8, doubles up the rooks, you have to trade rooks. Man, this is tough. Now, you were showing a game earlier that Carlsen beat Ifan, and the end of that game reminded me of the end of this game. What? What did I say?
Carlsen.
Who? Isn't that the same person? All right, I meant Caruana. Okay, so Carlsen was playing Caruana. No, okay. I'm not having a, well, maybe. Okay. Am I having a stroke? All right. Maybe. Okay, I'm not sure who's higher rated now because Caruana keeps winning all his games. Carlsen's easier to say. All right, so rook f4. I have to click on training now because the game's about to end. Now, I was complaining earlier, but now I like this bishop. No, I'm just kidding. Knight e4, queen d8, queen e5 check. Oops. And this is what happens when you see one threat and prevent it. Knight f6 was going to be annoying. Knight g5 was going to be annoying. Knight d6. So he played queen d8 and defends everything. All squares are defended, right? But the queen was defending the rook, so the rook wasn't under attack. Queen e5 check wasn't possible, so those threats weren't seen because they didn't exist. Queen d8 made those threats exist. Sort of like at the end of the game, Caruana played rook e8 and then he's winning everything. Yeah. All right, and then queen e5 check resigns because the rook's hanging on f4, obviously. Yeah. And what's funny is, different than a lot of other players, usually when my pieces are active, they're sort of active. Karpov's pieces are always close to each other active. There's two knights, two rooks, yeah, they're always like working together. His opponent's pieces, mathematically as far apart as possible. I did it. I did drawings, I told Matt Larson. Matt Larson said that's as far as they can be. Yeah. So it's funny that one time black had like good defensive everything, defending his bishop, defending his rook, although queen's sort of in the corner. Then he put it in the center and then loses everything. But yeah, if white plays knight f6 or knight g5 or knight d6, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So queen d8 check, and he's like, yeah, I get to resign. So that was 3 examples. I had several more of Karpov being white in Ruy Lopez and slowly improving his position. Although, if you're a supercomputer, let me see, nope. Okay, if you're a supercomputer like Komodo or Stockfish with like 500 cores, then these advantages on move 2025, which look like, white's a little better, they're like, yeah, white's winning. They're just like, yeah, like this is terrible for black. Black had to play better earlier. And so people learn to play better by watching these games, then they could draw sometimes. Okay, but still, a really dumb idea if you're black against Karpov and you decide, I'm going to be slightly worse and try to draw. And then you get outplayed because your pieces go to the wrong squares, cough, cough. And Karpov's king always has like everything around it, safe, bishop on f1. You could never put him in check. And black's position never makes any sense. So the one time I played the Ruy Lopez, I won, but it didn't look like this, so you can't see it. It didn't. If you're still like equal, then my opponent blundered, I moved 37 or something. Yeah. Because I don't know how to like do this and this and this and this and this. Yeah. And that's why Karpov was good for such a long time and is still good. Agreed? Yeah. And after I showed these games to Karpov, what did he say?
I don't speak English.
Karpov doesn't speak English?
Well, no, he pretends to.
What? Speaks English better than we do. What? No. Anyone? Somebody? What did he say?
Class dismissed.
Class dismissed. Yeah, of course.